Hi, my name is Thisuri Lokubarana, and this is for my assignment 1 of the strategy and the global competitive environment. Let us now move on to the presentation. The industry that I will focus on is the solar PV industry, the solar photovoltaic sector, and the geographical location will be China. And why I chose China is because it remains a leader in terms of combined capacity, and almost 1/3 of the global PV installed capacity is from China. The key players in the market are China Solar Limited, Jinko Solar Holding Corporation, the Boxer Santec Solar Power Co. Limited, the China Synergy Co. Limited, and JA Solar Holdings Corporative Limited. Let us now move on to the industry trends and their impact. I've done the PESTEL model to find out the trends, and I've finalized on 9 trends, with them being easy accessibility, digitalization, artificial intelligence, changes made to subsidies, China's war against environmental pollution, the global energy transformation driven by renewables, high PV power cost, climate commitment, renewable portfolio standard provides new policy opening with the provincial governments, and fluctuations in the material cost of solar PV. I've also conducted the Porter's 5 forces analysis, and I've also seen whether the threats of new entrants, buyers bargaining forces, suppliers bargaining power, threats of substitutes, and competitive rival industry. And why I've done the Porter's 5 forces model is because I wanted to check. I wanted to see what is the most impactful for my next matrix, which is the uncertainty test. And I've done an uncertainty test on all of the 9 key trends to find out what is the most impactful, what 2 trends are the most impactful, and what 2 trends has the highest level of uncertainty. Now, whereas there are 3 key trends which has high importance and high uncertainty, I've chosen 2 trends to design my grid. And let me tell you why I chose those 2 trends. So the changes made to subsidies is because the previously high curtailment rate reveals that solar power is currently at an overcapacity at China. In hopes of increasing the competitiveness of domestic solar companies and promoting the healthy development of the industry, China has officially embarked on the road towards subsidy removal in 2018, removing subsidies by 0.05 RMB per kilowatt hour. The gradual removal of subsidies should benefit the solar industry in the long run, since it is no secret that Chinese solar companies rely heavily on subsidies for profit. My next key trend that I've chose to design my grid would be the fluctuations in material cost of the solar PV industry. Now, silver expenses surged at the end of January as investor frenzy swept the markets. iShares Silver's Trust, the biggest exchange-traded fund that tracks silver, recorded a fee as excessive as $26.70. The silver-based price have modified alongside with the LMBA silver spot price curve. And also the purified metalloid silicon have also touched $25.88 a kilogram from 6.19 kilograms within the span of a year. Now, all these factors taken into consideration, fluctuations in the material cost of solar PV would have a massive impact on how the future of the solar PV industry would turn out to be. I made one assumption in writing scenarios, which is energy intensive lifestyle of the public will continue to grow. And this is a sample of my 2-dimensional grid. Now let's move on to the scenario identification. There will be 4 scenarios. The first one would be the golden scenario, where the cost of the materials used to manufacture solar PV increases, while the government reduces the subsidies as well. The next will be the silver scenario, where the government does not make any changes to the subsidiary scheme, but and the high cost of materials also increases. Likely why the Chinese government did not make any changes to the subsidy scheme is maybe because of the high cost of the raw materials and to provide some sort of relief to the solar industry. The next would be the black scenario. One, according to my opinion, would be the least favorable scenario, which I would explain in detail later. This is when the Chinese government does not make any changes to their subsidy scheme, regardless of the fact that the cost of the materials are declining. And also, this would further lead the industry towards breakneck growth. The ultimate scenario would be the platinum scenario, where the cost of the materials used to manufacture solar PV reduces and the government reduces the subsidies given to the solar industry as well. This might be because the cost of the raw materials are reducing and the government thought they can save the industry by giving the subsidies, which won't have an impact on the industry as well. So let us go into detail on the four scenarios. The black scenario, which is the least unfavorable scenario, would ultimately lead to the breakneck growth situation, as there would be a risk of overcapacity in the supply chain because the industry has been expanding rapidly. And if when you have subsidies provided given by the government, and also when the raw materials are low, this would mean that the industry is very, very lucrative. And this would also mean that it will soon have an out of control growth, which will leave a huge funding gap in the subsidy scheme, which will limit the sector and might cause an untimely death of an industry which might otherwise be an extremely profitable and a very fruitful industry. Also, according to this scenario, the manufacturers of the raw materials of the solar industry will have to gear up to meet an unexpected surge in demand for PV modules, and thus it makes the makers of raw material find it a bit difficult to keep up with the extremely high intensive demand. We will now move on to the silver scenario. The silver scenario, like I mentioned earlier, is when the Chinese government does not make any changes to the subsidies, but however, the cost of the raw materials have increased. Now, this will likely limit a really small percentage of the accessibility of the markets, and this might slow down the industry also by a really small percentage, but since the subsidies are still being provided by the industry might still propel on. And this will also lead to majority of the companies leading heavily on subsidies if they want to get into the grid, because the cost of raw materials are high. And relying heavily on subsidies provided on the government once again will once again leave a massive gap in the subsidy scheme, as more and more companies are looking to get into the grid and they will start applying for subsidies due to the high cost of raw materials. My next scenario would be the platinum scenario. And in an ideal unicorn world, this would be the ultimate scenario, because this scenario is when the cost of the raw materials are low, but the government has removed the subsidies, which means the industry won't be affected a lot and the industry will be saved as well. And why I think this is a good scenario is this type of scenario will benefit the industry from rapid technological improvements such as digitalization and artificial intelligence. And when you take digitalization and artificial intelligence into the scenario, this will reduce the costs and expenses further and large-scale adoption. And this will in turn mean most regions will be ready to compete on the market without subsidies, providing a more sustainable path for future growth of the solar PV industry. It will also encourage firms to shift their reliance from government policies to the market. This will help eliminate excess capacity, encourage technological improvements, and the sector's irrational expansion and easy accessibility factors, and concentrate resources in the stronger, more already established firms. And now to the scenario which I choose, which I think is the most plausible scenario which will take place, is the gold scenario. Now, gold scenario, let me give you a background as to why I think the gold scenario will be the most plausible scenario according to my opinion. China has led the world in new solar installations in each of the past 5 years, helped by guaranteed electricity prices. But the cost of the subsidies has been growing unsustainably as manufacturers have expanded rapidly to meet demand, the risk of overcapacity that has grown. The Chinese government helped a lot. They provide complete policy support system for renewable energy, and they've formulated a series of policies to promote renewable energy since 2006, especially the benchmark feed-in tariff and tax incentives. But however, they also realize that since that the industry is at an overcapacity, and them providing subsidies is not going to be healthy for the future development on the history. And therefore, they've already started to reduce the subsidies provided. For example, the added value tax is levied by half. And they've slowly started to remove the benefits which was provided to them by the government. I understand that the subsidy policy in China is crucial for promoting renewable energy development, and it is important to assess the impacts of a reduction in subsidies on renewable energy and energy transition. And there's been a lot of complaints by the company saying that without subsidies, once again, there's no return on investment for over a decade. And this might lead to investors and property owners not being very interested in distributing solar, because with subsidies, it only takes 7 years to recoup the investment. But controlling and not giving subsidies is crucial if they want to control breakneck growth in the solar sector, principally by accelerating the phase-out subsidiaries. Hence, once again, this is why the golden scenario is my most plausible scenario. And I understand, um, like I said earlier, that it might not be the most ideal situation. But with that being said, the cuts and the price increases are a clear signal from the government that the sector needs to be less reliant on subsidies, and it needs to shift its focus from rapid scaling and expansion towards technological improvements to further bring down and reduce costs and expenses. And the cost of raw materials, like I mentioned earlier, is going to go high. The price of silver it's been recorded, it's already been high. And silicon, the prices have already increased. Simple things as sand, the cost of raw materials have increased. So with all of the cost of raw materials being increased, this will force the industry to look at more creative solutions. And this might actually be the push that the industry needs to be creative, to be less dependent on the government, and to be more dependent on the market. And ultimately, it will also be the most sustainable scenario in moving forward if we need the solar industry to have a sustainable growth in the future. Thank you. These are my reference page, by the way, and thank you so much.